Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Rick Fussell and this is the Engraving Workshop. In today's video, we're going to be building a custom keepsake box / jewelry box for the assistant supervisor who's graduating from college with her bachelor's degree at the young age of 19. That's coming up next here at the Engraving Workshop. For this build, I went with two hardwoods, birdseye maple and bloodwood, mainly for the contrast. That light maple paired with the deep red of bloodwood just works. I'm starting over at the table saw, resawing some 4/4 birdseye maple down to size. From there, it's over to the planer to bring everything down to a final thickness of about 3/8 of an inch. I'll repeat that same process for the bloodwood so everything matches up. Now I'll be honest, this project is being designed on the fly. No sketches, no plans, just kind of building as I go. All I really know at this point is that the assistant supervisor, my daughter's into two things, K-drama and koala bears. And if you're anything like me, you might have had to Google what K-drama even is. So yeah, that's the design brief. Somehow this box needs to bring all that together. We'll see how that turns out. Next, I'll move back to the table saw and rip the sides of the box down to their final width, 3.5 inches. Once that's done, I'll switch over to the mitered gauge and cross-cut everything to length. The long sides will come in at 8 inches and the short sides at 5. With the sides cut, it's time to start working on the bloodwood trim. Back at the table saw, I'll rip the trim pieces down to 3/8 of an inch, then cut them to match the lengths of each box side, adding 45-degree miters on the ends so everything wraps clean. Now for the glue up, and instead of clamps, I'm using painter's tape to hold everything together while it dries. Works great for something like this and keeps things nice and tight. And just as a reminder, I'm still designing this on the fly, because by the time this is all said and done, the only trim piece that's actually going to stay is the top one. Yeah, this is one of those builds, but that's part of it. You've just got to let the creative side take over and see where it goes. So remember that match grain I was going for on the sides? Yeah, it turns out adding trim kind of defeats that whole idea. So back to the table saw I go, using the miter gauge to carefully cut the side trim back off. At this point, the miters on the box sides are set, and instead of fighting the design, I decided to just lean into it a little bit. I'm going to add a curve along the bottom of the box, which also means the bottom trim has to go too, because why not make things more complicated? But honestly, when inspiration hits, you just have to roll with it. And I've got to say, that curve along the bottom starts to give it a little bit of an Asian-inspired theme. At least that's what I'm telling myself. To lay it out, I grabbed a piece of 3mm hardboard and used a simple string method to create a smooth, consistent curve. Then I taped the box sides together, short sides and long sides, using painter's tape so I could cut them all at once and keep everything symmetrical. Over at the scroll saw, only because I already had a resaw blade in the bandsaw, I cut out the curve, staying just a little proud of the line. Then it's over to the oscillating belt sander to clean things up and bring everything right down to the line. Back at the table saw, I'm cutting the dados for the bottom of the box. But with that curve along the base, the placement matters a little more. So I'm starting the dado about 1/8 of an inch up from the apex of that arch along the bottom edge of the sides. I've got the blade set to about 1/8 of an inch depth, and since I'm not using a dado stack, I'll make multiple passes, slowly bumping the fence over until the groove fits just right. I'll keep checking the fit as I go until it matches the thickness of the bottom panel perfectly. Once that's dialed in, I can move on to the bottom itself, ripping and cross-cutting it down to a final size, which comes in at 7 3/4 inches by 4 3/4 inches. Before glue up, I want to take care of all the inside surfaces while I can still get to them easily. So I'll sand everything with the random orbital sander starting at 120 grit and working my way up to 320. Now for the glue up, and with the mitered corners like this, I like to keep it simple. I'll use clear packing tape along the outside edges to pull the miters tight, and painter's tape on the inside to help catch any glue squeeze out. And one important detail, I'm not adding any glue in the dado for the bottom panel. That way the wood still has room to move with the seasons. Once everything's together, I'll wrap it with a ratchet strap around the box to apply even pressure and hold it all tight while the glue dries. While the box is gluing up, I can shift my attention to the lid. I've milled some bloodwood down to 3/4 of an inch thickness for the top. To create the inlay, I'm using a piece of 1/4 inch scrap plywood and some double-sided tape to build a simple routing template. That gives me a clean, repeatable guide for the shape. The inlay itself is sized at 6.5 inches by 3.5 inches, centered in the lid. Using a straight bit and a router, with a collet set up, I'll route down about 1/8 of an inch to create the pocket for the birdseye maple inlay. Once that's done, I remove the template and square up the rounded corners with a chisel so everything fits tight and clean. The inlay stock is cut to 1/4 of an inch thick, which means once it's glued in, it will actually sit proud of the surface by about 1/8 of an inch. With a little glue and a bit of persuasion from the mallet, the inlay drops into place nicely. Then bring in a few F-clamps to hold everything down while the glue sets. That slight raised surface ends up adding the Asian-inspired design and gives the lid a sort of pillow effect, which I think works really well for this piece. With the box dry, I can move on to sanding the exterior just like I did on the inside. Using the random orbital sander, I'll work through the grit starting at 120 and working my way up to 320 until everything is smooth and ready for finish. Now I can shift my focus to the feet, which is another chance to bring in some of that Asian-inspired design language. I start by cutting some bloodwood down to 3/4 of an inch square stock, then cross-cutting it into 1 3/4 inch lengths using the sled. I'll need 4 of these for the box. Next, I'll cut a 1/2 inch rabbet on each piece to create an L-shaped foot profile. Over at the oscillating belt sander, I shape 2 gentle curves on each foot so they mirror the curve along the bottom of the box. Then it's time for installation. I'll attach the feet using glue, painter's tape, and a ratchet strap to hold everything in place while it dries. The key here is alignment, making sure the curve on the foot flows right into the curve on the bottom of the box. When it comes to all together, it really helps tie the whole design together. Back to the top. If I didn't mention it earlier, the lid was only rough cut when I installed the inlay, so now I can bring it to its final size, cutting it down to 5 3/8 inches by 8.5 inches using the crosscut sled. Next, I set the table saw blade to a depth of about 1/4 of an inch and cut a 1/2 inch rabbet all the way around the underside of the lid. This lets the lid sit down inside the box with about 1/4 of an inch overhang all the way around, another subtle design detail that ties into that Asian-inspired look. From there, I head over to the router table with a cove bit and add another design feature to the lid. I do this in 2 passes to avoid any potential tear out and keep the cut clean. Now I've got one more opportunity to add some character to the piece, and that's the handle. I start by building the base for the handle. I'll rip some 3/4 inch bloodwood down to 1 inch widths. Then I'll set my table saw blade to 80 degrees and cut the angled sides. That leaves me with a wider base at the bottom and a narrower top. Then I cut a 3/16 inch groove about a 1/2 inch deep into the top of each base piece. Using the crosscut sled, I cut the 2 bases at 1 and 1/4 inches long. For the handle itself, I take another piece of bloodwood down to 3/16 of an inch thick at the table saw, then freehand a shape that I sketched out and cut at the scroll saw. And just like the rest of this build, I'm kind of designing as I go. Once it's cut, I smooth everything out on the oscillating belt sander, and I also sand the bases so they taper upward from the bottom. Then it's just a matter of gluing everything together and centering it on the lid, holding it in place with a few spring clamps while the glue sets. So now for the final design element, the koala bear. If you've been following the channel, you know I picked up a budget-friendly laser engraver a couple weeks ago, so this felt like the perfect project to put it to use. I found a koala image online, added her name in a fancy font, and engraved it right on the front of the box. And just like that, everything starts to come together. All that's left now is finish. I went with 3 coats of gloss lacquer, lightly sanding between coats with synthetic steel wool to keep everything smooth. And while I was at it, I added one more detail. I engraved a personal note on the inside of the lid, just something simple to let her know how proud I am. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, then please leave it a thumbs up and please share the video. It really helps out the channel. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then I highly recommend that you smash that subscribe button. It's free and painless. And I'd also ask that you ring that bell icon. That way you can be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all you existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support that you give this channel. Now I'll leave links in the video description below to any tools and equipment that I might have used on this build, and I appreciate you spending some time with me in the workshop today. I'm Rick with the Engraving Workshop, and as always, have a wonderful day and God bless.